This is going to be a talk about war-related graves in South Londonderry as part of a project with the Castledawson Royal British Legion branch, to whom I gave this talk on Saturday, the 5th of February. On Monday, 1st July 1929, the Castledawson Protestant War Memorial Hall was formally opened in a ceremony chaired by Captain Charles Norman Lockhart Strong. The hall was designed by a Mr. Jury and was formally opened by Master James Dawson Chichester Clark at the side of the slide. He was the 6-year-old son of Commander James Jackson Lennox Cunningham Chichester Clark, DSO, who was Member of Parliament at Westminster for the South Londonderry constituency. James Dawson Chichester Clark was later Prime Minister of Northern Ireland from 1969 to 1971. Inside the hall, a memorial tablet was installed, and that had been funded by and erected by the Castledawson Company, UVF, and it was unveiled by Captain Strong. The memorial lists the names of 30 men who died, along with the names of 152 men and 6 women who served during the Great War. Although the memorial was funded by the UVF and installed in the Protestant War Memorial Hall, it covers all who served and or died from the Castledawson district. William Duncan was born on 28th November 1891 on the Shankill Road in Belfast to Dr. William Duncan and Annie Williamson McBride. William Duncan Sr. was born in County Londonderry and was a medical student and living in Larne when he married Annie McBride from Glynn at Lochmorn Reformed Presbyterian Church near Carrickfergus, and they got married in 1882. They had 6 children, but only 5 were still living in 1911. Annie Duncan was 4 months pregnant when her husband died of chronic bronchitis and cardiac arrest at the family home on the Shankill Road on 11th July 1905. And their final child, Sarah, was born on 5th December at Thorndale Avenue. William Duncan Jr. enlisted with the 6th Battalion Royal Enniskilling Fusiliers, which was part of 31st Brigade in the 10th Irish Division. The other infantry battalions in this brigade were 5th Royal Enniskilling Fusiliers, 5th Royal Irish Fusiliers and 6th Royal Irish Fusiliers. In effect, it was an Ulster Brigade within the 10th Irish Division. They received orders to prepare for service at Gallipoli on 27th June 1915. Most of the units had assembled on the island of Lemnos by the end of July, and the 30th and 31st Brigades landed at Suvla Bay on 6th August 1915. 29th Brigade had landed at Anzac Cove the previous day. Private William Duncan was killed in action on 22nd August 1915, aged 23, and is commemorated on the Helles Memorial on the Gallipoli Peninsula. It should be noted that the date of death recorded on the family memorial in Castledawson Presbyterian Church graveyard is 21st August 1915. Annie Duncan subsequently received a war gratuity of £3 in March 1920, and William Duncan is commemorated on the memorial tablet for Argyle Place Presbyterian Church, which is now Westkirk on the Shankill Road. Still in Castledawson Presbyterian Church graveyard, Thomas Mcknight was born on 22nd August 1888 to John Mcknight and Matilda Donnelly, who farmed land near Magherafelt. John Mcknight died of septicemia at Avoca Street in Belfast on 26 February 1908 at the age of 63. In 1911, Matilda Mcknight was living at Avoca Street with 6 children, ranging in age from 16 to 25. The family was recorded as being Christian Brethren in the 1901 census and the 1911 census. Matilda Mcknight later lived at Alexandra Park Avenue in Belfast, and before the war, Thomas Mcknight worked for David Mitchell Limited, whose house furnishing, ironmongery and jewellery shop was located in Castle Street next to Anderson Macaulay. He was a company commander with North Belfast Regiment UVF and was posted to France with 16th Battalion Royal Irish Rifles in October 1915. He was commissioned in November 1916 and posted to 10th Battalion Royal Enniskilling Fusiliers. Second Lieutenant Thomas Mcknight was killed in action on 21st February 1917, aged 28, and is buried in Burke's Cemetery Extension in Belgium. Moving over to Castledawson Church of Ireland graveyard, William James Hammond was born on 26 April 1877 at Killynice near Magherafelt to William Hammond, a furnaceman, and Mary Jane Evans. William Hammond was an established postman when he married Isabella Hudson on 5th June 1900 at St John's Church of Ireland at Wood Chapel. They were living in Castledawson in 1901, but were living at Church Street in Magherafelt with their 4 children in 1911. William Hammond was a past master of Curran Masonic Lodge, and he enlisted with the Royal Inniskilling Fusiliers in Coleraine in the latter part of 1915. He was posted to the 11th Battalion on the Western Front after December 1915 and held the rank of Lance Corporal when he died of wounds on 12 September 1917, aged 40, and he is buried in the Etaples Military Cemetery in France. Isabella received a war gratuity of £6 in November 1919, which equates to approximately £317 in current terms. His widow was living at Main Street in Castledawson when she received a war pension at 26 shillings and 8 per week, with an allowance of 23 shillings and 6 per week for 4 children under the age of 16. The total weekly pension of 50 shillings and 2 equates to approximately £138 per week in current terms. On the anniversary of his death, in memoriam, notices were placed in the Mid Ulster Mail by his widow and by his eldest daughter. From the widow, sleep on, dear husband, in a foreign grave, a grave I will never see, but as long as life and memory last, I will remember thee. And from his eldest daughter, 1 year has passed, oh how I miss him. Loving him dearly, his memory I'll keep. Never while life lasts shall I forget him, dear to my heart in the place where he sleeps. Moving to Bellaghy and the Roman Catholic Church graveyard. Alexander Cusick was born on 11th November 1911 in Glasgow to John Cusick, a warehouseman, and Anne McShane. He attended Glasgow University, graduating with an arts degree in 1931. He enlisted for war service in Dundee and married Kathleen Margaret Mary Kilt on 28th December 1939 at a Roman Catholic church in Londonderry. Alexander was serving as a gunnery instructor with 133 Field Regiment Royal Artillery when he died of milial tuberculosis at 24th London General Hospital on 2nd June 1941, aged 30. This hospital was situated at Campbell College in Belfast. Kathleen Margaret Mary Cusick was living at Heatherley Avenue in Portstewart when Alexander died. And Margaret Kilt was born on 16th June 1909, and she died on 4th January 2010 at the age of 100. In the nearby Church of Ireland graveyard in Bellaghy, we have Charles Frederick Townsend, and he was born on 8th February 1911 at Long Itchington in Warwickshire to Frederick Townsend and Edith Lillian Raven, and she later lived at Brookside, Rugby, Warwickshire. He enlisted with 2nd Battalion Royal Sussex Regiment, but was attached to 4th Battalion Northamptonshire Regiment when he died. He was stationed in Belfast when he married Mary McGugan from the Old Park Road at Trinity Church of Ireland on 2nd September 1939. Mary McGugan's parents moved to Hillhead House in Bellaghy. Private Townsend died of gunshot wounds at the military camp at Ballyscullion House near Bellaghy on 9th September 1941, aged 30 and not 31 as recorded on the Commonwealth War Graves Memorial. The Civil Register of Death records his age as 37. Dr. William Cousley, the coroner for South Londonderry, decided that he had the authority under the emergency regulations to have the inquest held in camera. The coroner's inquiry concluded that Private Townsend died from a rifle bullet injury that was justifiably inflicted by a corporal in the execution of his duties. The details of what happened in the camp are not known, but there are local stories that his wife was having an affair with one of the officers, and Charles Frederick Townsend went berserk and was shot by one of the guards at the camp. Still in Bellaghy Church of Ireland graveyard, Arthur Desmond Bradley was born to William Bradley and Jane Conway of Greenview, Magherafelt, and he was working as a labourer when he enlisted with the Royal Ulster Rifles in Omagh on 30th July 1941. He gave his date of birth as 3rd July 1923, making him 18 years old. However, the attestation form has been annotated to record his date of birth as 1st October 1924, making him 16 when he enlisted. Rifleman Bradley landed on the beaches of Normandy with 2nd Battalion Ulster Rifles on 6th June 1944. He had received a letter from home on 15th May, but restrictions in the run-up to D-Day meant that he could not reply. On 13th June, Desmond used a standard field postcard to inform his family that he was quite well. 4 days later, on 17th June, Rifleman Bradley was killed in action at the age of 19 and is buried in La Deliverande War Cemetery in the Normandy region of France. Samuel James Dawson was born on 4th September 1893 to John Dawson and Sarah Jane Henderson, who farmed land near Bellaghy. William John Dawson, another son of John and Sarah, had emigrated to the United States in 1908, and Samuel departed from Mobile in County Donegal on board SS Venetia of the Anchor Line on 22nd April 1911. He arrived at Ellis Island on 2nd May 1911 and was living at Locust Valley on Long Island when he enlisted in the United States Army on 22nd April 1917 at Fort Slocum. His brother, William John Dawson, was recorded as the emergency contact. Samuel was a corporal with 34th Infantry Regiment, part of the American 7th Division, when he was killed in action on 22nd October 1918, aged 23. He was buried in a cemetery near where he fell, but his body was exhumed on 28th April 1919 and reinterred in St. Mihiel American Cemetery at Thiaucourt in the Meurthe-et-Moselle department in northeastern France. Note that the death date on the family memorial is recorded as 18th October 1918. Robert Hugh Wilson was born on 14th August 1887 at Bellaghy to James Wilson and Margaret Gill-Attlee. The family home was Old Town Downing, and James was recorded as being a grocer, druggist and farmer in 1901. In 1911, Robert Hugh Wilson was recorded as being a draper's assistant, and his father, aged 70, had dropped the farming but was still a druggist and grocer. Robert Hugh Wilson was working as a driver for Hastings Borough Council when he enlisted in the Otago Regiment on 24th August 1915, having given 1890 as his year of birth and Belfast as his place of birth. He was posted to the 1st Battalion, which disembarked at Suez on 20th December 1915. And whilst in Egypt, he was posted to the 14th Company whilst they were based at Ismailia in Egypt. And that was on 5th February 1916. He left for France on 6th April 1916. Robert Wilson was admitted to the No. 1 New Zealand Field Ambulance on 28th June 1916 with a sprained left ankle and transferred to the 25th General Hospital the following day. He was posted back to 14th Company on 18th July and was reported missing on 27th September 1916. A court of inquiry on 30th November 1916 concluded that he had been killed in action on 27th September. Private Robert Hugh Wilson was 29 years old and is commemorated on the Caterpillar Valley (New Zealand) Memorial in France and on the Roll of Honour for Bellaghy Presbyterian Church. Note that the family memorial records his age as 28. Not a war fatality as such, but a case that I thought was worth talking about. Henrietta Evans was born on 20th September 1883 at Bellaghy to William Evans, a stonemason and building contractor, and Ellen Usher, being the first of their 11 children. In 1911, Henrietta was a nurse at the Londonderry City and County Infirmary, and she joined the Queen Alexandra's Imperial Military Nursing Service Reserve on 29th April 1915. She served as a sister for 2 years at the King George V Hospital in Dublin and was awarded the Royal Red Cross decoration 2nd class in October 1917. Around the same time that her RRC award was reported in the London Gazette, Henrietta was posted to No. 5 General Hospital in France. She was hospitalised in France suffering from nervous debility and invalided home in late 1918. On 21st February 1919, she attended a medical board in Londonderry. After the board, she boarded the Londonderry to Castledawson train. And when the train arrived in Castledawson, the guard discovered her lying in the toilet with her throat cut and an open razor lying by her side. She was initially treated at the Coleraine Workhouse Infirmary before being transferred to the Londonderry Lunatic Asylum. Her mother raised objections to Henrietta's treatment with the Ministry of Pensions, who undertook to find better accommodation for Henrietta. Ironically, the medical board that was held in February concluded that while she was not fit for overseas service, she was fit for home service. Obviously, there'd been a lack of communication between the hospital system and the military. In April 1919, a second medical board concluded that Henrietta was suffering from acute melancholia, and she was discharged on 15th May 1919 as being permanently unfit for military nursing work. Henrietta Evans married John Calhoun at Magherafelt Registrar's Office on 17th November 1926, and she died in 1979. In 1920, Henrietta's uncle and aunt, Henry and Anne Evans, named their daughter Edith Cavell Evans in memory of the British nurse who was executed by the Germans as an alleged spy in Belgium. Moving down to Magherafelt and the Church of Ireland, St. Swithin's Church of Ireland graveyard. Joseph Milligan was born on 1st August 1889 at Rainey Street in Magherafelt to Joseph Milligan, a shoemaker, and Margaret McGill. He followed his father into the cobblering trade and enlisted with the Royal Enniskillen Fusiliers in Magherafelt on 14th November 1914. He was posted to France with 10th Battalion in October 1915 and was hospitalised on several occasions in the autumn of 1916 and was evacuated to the UK in October 1916. He returned to France on 28 April 1917 and was posted back to the 10th Battalion on 30th May. On 28 June 1917, whilst on duty in the trenches on Messines Ridge, Joseph sustained gunshot wounds to the right thigh and leg, the left shoulder and the left foot. He was treated at No. 2 Casualty Clearing Station and 13 General Hospital before being evacuated to the United Kingdom on 9th August 1917. Joseph was treated for 9 months at the County of Middlesex War Hospital and for 4 months at a hospital at Shepherd's Bush in London before being transferred to the UVF Hospital at Botanic Avenue in Belfast, and that was in late 1918. He was granted an honourable discharge on 24th October 1918 with Silver War Badge number 507781. Private Joseph Milligan died of a combination of his wounds and pneumonia in Magherafelt on 3rd December 1918, aged 29. The civil birth and death registers both record the surname as Milligan with a K, but the census returns record Milligan with a G. The civil register of death records his age as 26 rather than 29. Albert Mulholland Porter was born on 8 September 1918 at Magherafelt to John Porter, who was a soldier, and Mary Mulholland, who later lived at Union Road in Magherafelt. Albert married Matilda McLean on 2nd December 1939 at St. Swithin's Church of Ireland in Magherafelt, and they lived at Rainey Street in the town. He enlisted with the Royal Ulster Rifles, but later served with the Pioneer Corps. Albert Porter died of general paralysis of the insane at Union Road in Magherafelt on 17th January 1946, aged 27, although the civil register of death records his age at death as 26. James Kane was born on 15th September 1889 to William Kane and Elizabeth Simpson, who farmed land at Bellaghy. James and two of his elder brothers, Thomas and Robert, emigrated to Canada in 1909 and were living at Riverdale Avenue in Toronto with their uncle and aunt, James and Mary Vance. James was a postman with the Canadian General Post Office when he enlisted in Toronto on 27th March 1916 with 180th Overseas Battalion of the Canadian Expeditionary Force. He gave his date of birth as 16 September 1890 instead of 15 September 1889. He left Canada on 13th November 1916 and arrived in England 8 days later. He arrived in France with a reinforcement force on 17th March 1917 and was posted to the 4th Infantry Battalion at the end of the month. On 3rd May 1917, whilst on duty in the front-line trenches, he was severely wounded in the head by the explosion of an enemy shell. Prompt aid was given, and after being taken to a dressing station, he was sent to No. 6 Casualty Clearing Station, where he died the following day. Private James Kane was 27 years old and is buried in Barland Communal Cemetery Extension in France. William Edward Griswold was born on 18th October 1918 at Victoria Road in Londonderry to Edward Griswold and Mary Isabel Caldwell. Edward Griswold was born around 1892 at Bedford in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and he served with the Royal Canadian Regiment and the Canadian Army Service Corps in the Great War. He was stationed in Germany when William was born. Mary Isabel Caldwell, his mother, was born on 14th October 1894 at Garden Street in Magherafelt to Samuel Brown Caldwell, a law clerk, and Elizabeth Mary Beattie. Mary Caldwell served as a nurse during the Great War. The family was living in Nova Scotia after Edward was demobilised in 1919. After the death of Edward Griswold Sr., the family returned to Magherafelt, and William completed his education at Magherafelt Technical College. William Griswold enlisted with the Royal Air Force and was promoted to the rank of sergeant after 10 months service. He was serving as a wireless operator with 214 Squadron when he met his death. On the morning of 8th January 1941, a Wellington Mark I aircraft took off from RAF Strathhill near Ipswich on a test flight. The aircraft is believed to have iced up while flying in cloud, and it crashed at Great Ratting in Suffolk with the loss of the 6-man crew. Sergeant William Edward Griswold was 22 when he died, and his body was returned to Magherafelt for burial. The chief mourners at the funeral were his maternal grandfather, Samuel Brown Caldwell JP of Avongarth on Union Street, and his maternal uncles. He is commemorated on a brass plaque in First Magherafelt Presbyterian Church. William Henry Monroe was born on 1st October 1883 at Magherafelt to Alexander Monroe, who was a tailor, and Margaret McPherson, and they lived at Rainey Street in Magherafelt. After completing his education, he moved to Glasgow and later worked for a number of years at Penang before settling in Australia. He was employed as a stockman and living at Broken Hill in New South Wales when he enlisted with the Australian Imperial Force on 28 August 1914. He was subsequently posted to the 10th Infantry Battalion at Morfettville Camp. William Monroe held the rank of sergeant when his battalion left Port Adelaide on board HMS Australian Transport number A11 on 20th October 1914. This was the number allocated to SS Ascanius when it was requisitioned for war work. SS Ascanius was built at the Workman Clark Shipyard in Belfast in 1910. Although originally destined for the Western Front, his battalion was transferred to the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force, and Sergeant Monroe was killed in action on 25th April 1915 during the landings at Anzac Cove on the Gallipoli Peninsula. Sergeant Monroe was 31 years old and was initially buried in the Australian Cemetery at Anzac Cove, but now lies at rest in Beach Cemetery at Anzac Cove on the Gallipoli Peninsula. His age is recorded as 30 on the Commonwealth War Graves Commission database, and the family memorial records that he died on 27th April 1915, age 32. So there's a couple of variations on the family memorial as to his date of death and his age. John Park and Margaret Hughes farmed land at Grange near Desert Martin, and 2 of their sons died during the Great War and are commemorated on the memorial tablet in Curran Presbyterian Church and on the family memorial in First Magherafelt Presbyterian Church graveyard. Robert Park was born on 17th December 1888, and he enlisted with the North Irish Horse in December 1916. In September 1917, some squadrons of the North Irish Horse were dismounted and transferred to the 9th Battalion Royal Irish Fusiliers. Other squadrons went into the Corps of Hussars. Robert Park was wounded during the Battle of Cambrai in late 1917, and on 9th April 1918, the 9th Battalion was on the Ypres front when the Germans began their offensive in that sector. The battalion saw severe fighting between Wolvergam and Kemmel for more than a week and suffered many casualties. Robert Park was listed as missing between 9th and 19th April. On the 18th April, a composite battalion of 400 men from the 9th and 1st Royal Irish Fusiliers and 12th Royal Irish Fusiliers were caught in an enemy bombardment while moving to positions on the western slopes of Mount Kemmel. According to the War Diary for 108th Brigade, battalion moved to Kemmel Hill, but whilst halted near foot of North Slope, was heavily shelled, losing Captain Dispard killed and about 70 other casualties. Private Robert Park is recorded as being killed in action on 19th April 1918, aged 29, and is commemorated on the Tynecott Memorial. William John Park was born on 29th May 1887, and he emigrated to Canada on 9th October 1910 on board the SS Etonian. He married Isabel Ann Armstrong on 24th May 1915 at Simcoe in Ontario, and he was working as a motorman with the Toronto Suburban Railway and living at Burtmount Avenue in the city when he enlisted with the Canadian Expeditionary Force on 7th April 1916. He was allocated to the 170th Overseas Battalion, which was also known as the Mississauga Horse. His surname is recorded as Parke on the attestation form and on the CWGC database. 170th Battalion left Halifax, Nova Scotia on 25th October 1916 and arrived in Liverpool 6 days later. William John Park arrived in France on 29th November, being taken on to the strength of the 58th Battalion of the Canadian Infantry. On 11th December 1916, he was admitted to No. 7 Canadian Stationary Hospital at Le Havre with influenza. Transferred to No. 4 Convalescent Depot 8 days later and rejoined his unit on 6th March 1917. He was reported as missing on 26th October 1917 while taking part in an attack near Bellevue Spur to the west of the village of Passchendaele, but was not confirmed as a fatality until July 1918. The Canadian Circumstances of Death Register records that he was hit in the head by an enemy rifle bullet and instantly killed. He was 30 years old and is commemorated on the Milligan Memorial in Ypres. The final graveyard is the Roman Catholic Church graveyard at Milltown near Magherafelt. Mary Agnes Doherty was born on 10th September 1887 at Castledawson to Philip Doherty, who was an RIC constable, and Catherine Early. By 1901, the family was living at Meeting Street in Magherafelt, and in 1911, Mary was working as a nurse at Mohill in County Leitrim, and she had been a charge nurse at Dr. Stephen's Hospital in Dublin for 3 years when she volunteered for war service with the Queen Alexandra's Imperial Military Nursing Service Reserve. She was posted to France on 16th August 1914, and 10 months later, the New Belfast newsletter reported she had been awarded the Royal Red Cross decoration and had been mentioned in dispatches by Sir John French. Following a period of home leave, Mary Doherty was appointed as sister at the 29th General Hospital in Salonika. It was in northeastern Greece that she contracted malaria, and after returning to duty was struck down with dysentery and died on 5th September 1916. Sister Mary Agnes Doherty was 28 years old and is buried in the Lembet Road Military Cemetery in Salonika. Sister Doherty is commemorated on the Irish Nurses Memorial Tablet, which was originally installed in Arbour Hill Garrison Church in Dublin and dedicated on 6th November 1921. In 1922, the memorial tablet was relocated to St Anne's Cathedral in Belfast. Hugh McManus was born on 5th December 1919 at New Lodge Road in Belfast to Patrick McManus and Elizabeth Cairns. Patrick McManus was a soldier and living at Artillery Street in Belfast when he married Elizabeth Cairns from New Lodge Road on 20th August 1917 at St Patrick's Church on Donegal Street. Patrick McManus died at Magherafelt on 12th March 1946 at the age of 65. His son Hugh McManus joined the Royal Air Force after he completed his formal education at the Christian Brothers School in Monaghan. On 10th November 1942, 9 aircraft from 107 Squadron took off from RAF Massingham on a mission to bomb the Newmark, a German merchant ship which was in harbour at Le Havre. Sergeant Hugh McManus was the pilot of a Douglas Boston aircraft which collided with another Douglas Boston aircraft and crashed into the sea. Sergeant Hugh McManus was 23 years old, although Commonwealth War Graves records his age as 22, and he's commemorated on the Runnymede Memorial in England, along with his 3 crewmen and the 4 crewmen from the other aircraft who also died. The final person I'm dealing with in this talk is Henry Tohill, and there are various spellings of the family surname, including Toughil and Taughill. He was born on 30th May 1889 at Queen Street in Magherafelt to Henry Tohill, who is a flesher, and Maggie Lavelle. In the birth register, his mother's maiden name is spelt as Levele, but it's also represented in other documents as Lavelle and Laville. In 1901, the family was living at Rainey Street in Magherafelt. Henry Tohill played football for Derry Lauren Football Club, and he qualified as a resident of Cookstown by lodging with Bobby Allen on a Friday night. So in essence, he lived in Magherafelt, and every Friday he went down to Cookstown, stayed overnight, and that qualified him as a Cookstown resident to play for Derry Lauren. Henry Tohill enlisted with the Royal Enniskilling Fusiliers, as did 3 of his brothers, who all survived the war. During training, he was transferred to 6th Battalion Royal Munster Fusiliers, which was part of 30th Brigade in the 10th Irish Division, and his unit departed from Liverpool on 7th July 1915. Private Henry Tohill was killed in action during the Suvla Bay landings on 7th August 1915, aged 26. And is commemorated on the memorial on the Gallipoli Peninsula. And that brings this talk to an end.